Change is coming. Change is going to always hurt. Change is going to be the most difficult thing you're going to face in life. But if you can accept change, you're going to be fine.
Welcome to the Apostate Sisters interview series, where we get to know fellow survivors of the Worldwide Church of God. We'll hold space for their personal journeys as they've navigated challenging cult life and found their way out. Each episode, we sit down with former cult members to uncover their unique stories of struggle, resilience, and liberation. Through these conversations, we aim to shed light on the complexities of cult dynamics, the process of deconstruction, and the profound journey towards self-discovery and healing. Join us today as we meet our guest, Denny. Welcome, Denny. This is Deni Azeredo, a vibrant and insightful individual whose experiences within the Worldwide Church of God have shaped his unique perspective on faith, culture, and personal identity. He grew up deeply embedded in the Worldwide Church of God's Imperial Schools, and so his early life was marked by being close to those in leadership positions and challenging the status quo, even from a young age. He was a thoughtful observer and participant in the church's dynamics. He brings with him a wealth of firsthand experiences and his reflections on the impact of high-control religious institutions. So thank you so much, Denny, for being willing to come on to our podcast and share with our listeners all the experiences you had in the Worldwide Church of God.
Welcome, Denny. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Well, my father, joined the church, I think, back in 1976. So I was probably about a year old. And it was in Elizabeth, New Jersey. So East Coast. I think he found out about the church through the Radio Church of God and through the radio show. He was always searching for the path, for God, for, enlightenment, he always felt he grew up in a very religious home. My grandparents and aunts, uncles belong to what in Brazil is spiritists. I have half my family are like mediums and into all that spiritual stuff and talking to spirits and that kind of stuff. And my dad had been involved in that growing up, but he was afraid of it. I mean, he didn't feel comfortable in that. That wasn't his thing. But from talking to other family members, he was an active participant, and he understood everything. And he'd tell me stories about how some people tried to do bad things to our family, and they get these weird visions and stuff that say, hey, no, you can't touch this family. This family's protected. Don't mess with them. Actual people who receive spirits would say, no, we can't do anything to that family. This family's protected. And
wait, are you saying that was the case after the Worldwide Church of God was?
That was even before. That was even before. Even before from my grandparents, right? So my dad always grew up. He, he told me these stories about how people tried to do bad things, and my parents, when they in the 70s, they were immigrants. I was the anchor baby. I was born in 75, and in 76 the U.S. passed the law that the baby, if you were born in the U.S. you were a citizen, but your parents couldn't be legalized by the birth anymore. So I was I was born in September of 75. So, which my birthday's 9/11, by the way.
Oh.
So, yeah. So and what's interesting is that everywhere I've gone, especially since the Twin Towers, everybody forgets my birthday.
Oh, that's sad.
Overlooked.
Yeah, no. Man, in the army, they never remembered. They called me back off leave. All these craziness because of the day. But
yeah.
Life
Patty
is life.
mentioned that you were in the military.
Yes.
What branch were you in?
I joined the Army as a paralegal. I did 4 years as a paralegal, and then I did 4 years as a transportation movement coordinator.
That's right.
So
In fact, Denny, did you know that I was also logistics management? 88 November. I was
88
deployed
November.
back
I
in
was at
08, 09. Yes.
0809. I was
Yeah.
at that time I was still 27 Delta,
Okay.
but I deployed in November of 2006, and I was there till March of 2008.
Wow.
Wow, you were there a long time. Okay.
Yeah, no, it would be a 6-month deployment, and I had just gotten married to a girl that was an intel analyst, and she worked for the commanding general, General Odierno.
Oh.
And so she was on the last plane in, and 2 months into deployment, she went home pregnant. So with our first, and so I ended up staying there the entire deployment, and she went home and had to raise a baby by herself,
Oh man.
pretty
Yeah.
much for the entire time.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to see my firstborn. She was almost 11 months old.
Yeah. I've heard
Wow.
stories about that. Yeah.
I missed the birth. I missed everything. They wouldn't send me home on leave. It was just drama, military drama.
Yeah.
You know.
How many years were you in the service total?
8 years and 15 days. Because I was stop lost.
Wow.
Okay.
And I re-enlisted because I was stop lost. I couldn't get out, so I said I might as well take a bonus.
Now,
Yeah.
Nancy
And I never
talks about how her experience of growing up in the Worldwide Church of God, was very controlled, very rule oriented and structured. And so for her, she talks about how being in the military kind of like soothed something for her.
it was
And
Mhm.
did you find that too?
I was comfortable in the closed and tightness of all. I could basically maneuvering around the walls. They try to box you in, and I could maneuver my way in whatever I wanted, pretty much within that system, because I kind of would figure out who to talk to and what to do, and then I was a rules-based person. So
Right.
I mean, I was in legal, so I mean, very few people were going to argue with legal. and and most of the time when you argue with legal, you just go to more legal. And so I had some very good bosses who taught me a lot of things, and I I, I had a challenging time in the military, but I enjoyed it. I loved it. I have some good memories.
Yeah.
You
Can I ask
but-
what your difficulties were in the military? Because I think as much as I felt some sort of comfort to just kind of being told what to do, I also kind of wanted to break free. It was this weird dichotomy.
I always had a problem. I had a problem with authority. I had a problem with being told what to do. If you asked me to do something, I would turn the world upside down to take care of it. But if you told me to do something and I didn't feel like doing it, you were in for a fight. Yeah. I had a rougher time when I was, early enlistment. It became a little bit easier when I was a sergeant in charge of people, but I took care of my troops. My troops liked me because they knew I wasn't bending over for nobody. Yeah. I didn't care if you were an officer or what. I treated you like, nose to nose, and I did, so I set a lot of captains and lieutenants and all those people straight. I mean, I had a lot of respect for the higher military. I don't think I met very many incompetent people above the rank of major. Yeah, I had some pretty good colonels and lieutenant colonels that I worked for, that I enjoyed my time with them. I was, let's see here. I did legal assistance. I did claims. I did, shoot. One of my bosses, we used to go, when I was deployed, we used to carry, suitcases of money, dollar bills, and go sit down and do claims to people who had cows run over or shot, and pay for cattle and stuff like that. And,
I guess someone would have to do that. Yeah.
Even like family members deaths. I mean, people actually sadly would get like $500 for a child. I mean, it was like retarded stuff.
Oh my gosh.
It's really, a child was worth less than a cow because it supported the family. It was like it was just, yeah, it's horrible.
Oh.
Our government does some really
I
dirty
know.
things.
I've heard stories as well.
And
Where all were you deployed to, Denny?
I spent some Camp Victory, Green Zone.
Were you in Afghanistan or just Iraq?
I was in Iraq on my military deployment. As soon as I got out, I went to Afghanistan and spent 3 straight years there as a civilian contractor.
Okay.
I went to Jalalabad. The worst place I was at was a place called Shank. Sounds like, I mean, Shank is, getting stabbed. It basically,
Sure is.
it was a big runway surrounded by mountains, and we just get bombed every single day relentlessly. It was probably the roughest experience that I had.
The things you must have seen and experienced, Denny. Wow.
No shit.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, every day we'd hear the national anthem and taps, when they were sending out the bodies. So when I and then when I went to Jalalabad, we would start getting bombed, and we'd hear the Afghani national anthem. Different tunes give different feelings, and that affect me even that night sleeping and stuff.
No. Denny, how did your parents feel about you joining the military?
Well, my dad died in 2001, so he
okay.
wasn't around.
Okay.
I joined after that.
Okay.
He was always against. He was against. I was a Boy Scout. I was a police cadet. I was a volunteer at a local police department for several years at my last couple of years of high school.
Okay.
But everybody thought I was a narc at school. 21 Jump Street type stuff. But I basically knew I knew everything bad that everybody at school did, and I knew I could tell you every drug arrest, everything that happened. I used to file those things, day in and day out, and I did part-time, jailing work and help them do the paperwork. So I got pretty. That's where I got good at paperwork, and that kind of led me into the path that I ended up choosing. But back to Worldwide.
Well, that was great. That was great. I mean, it's
great,
interesting to see, where Worldwide took you.
So in the late 70s, my dad joined the church, and he had 2 kids then also. I had a sister born in January, and a sister born in December. So my mom was pregnant all year, back to back. Yeah, so, back to back.
Denny, it's you and 2 sisters then?
I have 3 sisters, but the third one was born way after the.
Okay.
Way after all the experiences, so she didn't get to participate or have any memory of the nonsense we went through. Earliest memories I remember of Worldwide were, I remember Imperial Schools.
Can I just have you explain about the Imperial Schools? Because when you mentioned it, I was like, I do remember that, but I don't know that I really knew what it was like or about.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what was happening is public school, United States, everywhere, public schools is not really the best. It's not really the greatest. If you want to put your kids in private school. And the options were Catholic school, or some other organization, school. And so the church decided, well, let's make our own school so that we can put our own kids in and teach them to be leaders in our in our community, and honestly, I think that was a great idea. I had positive experiences at school. School was tough. School challenged me. Now, Imperial went through the phase I remember. Okay, we still did corporal punishment. I used to get swatted on a fairly regular basis because my family's Brazilian and we're late for everything. We're late, so I'd get swatted for being late to school. I'd get swatted for not doing my homework. And whatever, you don't mouth off to teachers. You learn to respect them. The stuff that kids get away with today, we never got away with nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Denny, where did you go to school? I mean, like you're
in Pasadena. So my parents in the 70s had some issues, so they decided to send me and my sisters to live with my grandparents from 78 and 79. We went to live with my grandparents in Brazil, in Rio.
And that's where your family's from, correct?
And that's where my family's originally from, right? In Rio, a little area called Guadalupe. Mm-hmm. And my parents spent the next 2 years trying to get their immigration status, fixed and correct, and try to get their residency in the States. And at that time, you had to stay 5 years without traveling to get your residency. And that became a problem because my mom missed the kids, and she had, 3 kids all living with her mom in Brazil. And she wanted to see them, and she couldn't leave the country, and it was tough.
As a mother, I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
So it was tough for her. It was tough for my dad. He worked nonstop. He worked his butt off, and so he asked for help from the church. The church set up a Feast of Tabernacles in 1979. I think it was on a farm. I think the farm belonged to a guy named. Was Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It was the first Smith I ever remembered. Yeah, they were Americans that bought land in Brazil and
wow,
and fell and lived there for most of the rest of their life. They had a farm in a state. I think it's called Espírito Santo, which means Holy Spirit. Brazil's a mostly Catholic country. And they sent, I think, 1 or 2 ministers down. Most the people they sent, nobody spoke Portuguese except my dad. My dad was supposed to be the translator. That was the excuse they gave the government to be able to get the leave to be able to leave the country on this whole religious holiday. I hadn't seen my dad in 2 years almost, and the first memories I remember was them picking us up, putting us in a car, driving us, almost all, like 8 hours or something to wherever this place was, and spending the next 7 days on a farm, riding horseback, and listening to preachers preach, all morning, and then we play in the afternoon, and that was I guess we would tolerate the preaching to be able to play.
That's right. Yeah. Do you know were there quite a lot of Feast of Tabernacles sites around the world at that point, or was that pretty early in shifting into that worldwide perspective?
They had some in Europe. Armstrong had always wanted to spread out worldwide, literally worldwide. But that was the thing. He would recruit a bunch of ministers from England, and then he'd preach to England. He'd recruit a bunch of people from Finland, and they'd go to Finland. And he'd use the people within the language, within their culture. The church was a business, after all. A multi-million-dollar, today would be billions of dollars, and it was very successful. Okay, yep. Him going back to the knowledge of good and evil, and Adam and Eve, trying to break it down Barney style, bring it back to the beginning, made sense.
Right.
And
that's what he taught too. Right. He wanted to talk to people on like a 3rd grade level so that he could reach out to as many people as possible.
And I mean, he was successful at it. I mean,
yeah, he was.
And I got to have dinner with him. I got to, be at events with him, with Armstrong.
You had dinner with Herbert W. Armstrong.
Many times.
This is what I was saying, Nancy. Denny was like in the upper echelons, like
Denny, I didn't know.
I was I was a nobody, but and my dad was next to whatever was going on. He was downstairs from Raider, I think, for a little while. I mean, he did translating.
Was that primarily your dad's in to that upper echelon? Was the fact that he could translate into Portuguese?
He was I think he was the first Brazilian speaker that joined the church, I think. And so anything and everything that happened involving Brazil, involving that part of the world, usually involves somebody in contact with him. I mean, his dream was to bring his whole family into the church, and in Brazil, and make this a big deal. That was his dream at that time. My dad, as misguided as a lot of what he went through was, he did what he believed. He wasn't. I mean, you can accuse a lot of people of hypocrisy. if my dad said something, he would go to the end of the world to pay it back. He would not, he would not leave you hanging.
That sounds so similar, honestly, to our dad.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been a bit of a archetype, right? Because I would say that for as difficult as it has been and problematic in some ways, like our dad is loyal and dedicated to those ideals. So that's really in line.
I think that was just synonymous with Worldwide Church of God. You really had to believe this shit in order to be involved. Aside from people raised in it, I'm talking people who put themselves there willingly.
I mean, we felt like we were set apart. We felt like we knew we were different, but we had a reason we were different because we were the chosen ones. I mean,
exactly.
Everybody thinks that, but we knew we were. I mean, the other people just thought they were. We knew we were because we were different. We had the important things that involved, following God.
And it was very convincing, which I think when the church split apart over these doctrinal changes, that's why it was like a mind blow for so many people. I'm like, I don't want to change because this is what sets us apart from other people and makes us feel like we are the chosen ones. We are elevated amongst others. And now all of a sudden we're all sitting at the table. People didn't like that.
I mean, a lot of people came out of that kind of religion stuff before.
Yep.
Going to Sunday school and this and that, and the thought of going back to that was a step backwards.
Right.
And even today, I want to take a step forward, and I want to grow, and I want to get smarter and get better and stronger, everything. And I don't want to go backwards. I mean, if you drive a Mercedes, you don't want to drive a Ford. It's like so we thought we were in the Mercedes. I mean, we thought we were in the best of the best. Right.
Right.
I mean, yes, we couldn't afford the Mercedes. My dad, he learned through experience because you have to look the part to be the part. Mm-hmm. And so he played the part pretty well. My first memory of a political person was shaking hands with Anwar Sadat in front of Ambassador Auditorium. That was my first. I remember. Yeah, I was there. I was at. I think he was. Imperial Schools had some kind of event. We went to the track and field right in front of the Ambassador Auditorium that they built. And
the Egyptian president, is that correct?
That was the president of Egypt. That was around, I think it was 1981. He came in, he shook hands, said hello to all the kids. He was very polite, very nice to us. And I guess he either had just signed or was getting ready to sign the peace accords with Israel. And he signed it. Within 6 months, he was dead. They assassinated him. Okay?
I remember reading about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. I remember meeting the king and queen of Thailand.
What a semi-charmed situation you found yourself in.
He really went to the cream of the people in charge of the world. And so we thought, hey, wow, this is big. This is nice. And shoot, I know I've had my experiences with other religions. I went to the Seventh-day Adventist one time, and I got there and they couldn't, the girls couldn't listen to music and dance. I could have been Amish and had the same life. I mean, life is as hard as you make it, and they make it pretty hard on themselves. I'm like, the rules you set for yourself and choose to live by tell a lot about you.
Yeah.
And it told a lot about, the church, and they set some pretty high standards, and a lot of people didn't qualify for most of the stuff that they said,
Denny, is eating pork kind of a common thing in Brazil? Because I know, in Colombian culture, they fry it, they skin that shit and fry it up and eat it as snack.
Pork is everywhere. Pork is everywhere. So in the 80s, Armstrong had always had that young ambassador thing.
Yeah.
And so Imperial had the little ambassadors, which were even the pre to the pre. I was always involved in choir, and back in the early 80s, I think China had discovered that tomb with all the terracotta soldiers. the terracotta soldiers, Armstrong arranged for those terracotta soldiers to be displayed at Ambassador. I forget exactly where in the college he had it displayed, but
He did actually display some?
he had some of them flown down here and down to Pasadena, and and China sent a delegation of children and a bunch of stuff, and so they had us escort them, and so we did concerts with them, okay, and as these things went on tour, we went with them to the different events. Obviously, we did Pasadena, we did Washington State, I think Seattle somewhere. We did San Francisco, and I think we did Washington, D.C. And at that time, I got to meet Papa Bush and Reagan, and we got to, we had like a dinner with, all these important stuff at the White House. Okay, yeah, and all that stuff was
rub shoulders with famous people now.
Look, I worked as a movie extra for a little while, and I got my 10 seconds of of not so famous time. I got tripped by Ed Asner. I got to shake hands with Arnold, and I thought Stallone was a jerk. Okay, I did bodyguard work for a little while, and I think he had the short man syndrome, and none of his bodyguards could be taller than him because he had those big platforms. Stallone, yeah, Stallone's short. I'm 6'2".
You're 6'2"? Oh wow.
I'm 6'2", and about today I'm about 240, 250.
Yeah. Funny story about Stallone though. My husband, Denny, my husband is from India, right? And so the first time he was in the US, he was in Los Angeles just wandering around. He sees Sylvester Stallone in his car, and he just chases him in the vehicle, and he just gets out of the vehicle like at a stoplight and wants a picture with him. Eventually Stallone's like, okay, just take a quick picture. And
it's
actually really funny.
My cousin down here in Brazil, his dream was to meet Sylvester Stallone, and he had a security company, and Stallone came down one time and to do a movie, and he got the bid to guard Stallone, and he said it was the most disappointed he's ever been to finally meet your hero and to be disappointed because the guy treated him so badly. Okay, yeah, it was.
Okay, that's not the first time I've heard Stallone's kind of a jerk in real life.
No, but so I mean, so I don't want some of those things mark us, and we just go on. I'm not intimidated by famous people. Put it to you that way. I can talk to a very famous person, or I can talk to a very poor person, and I will treat them both the same.
That's good.
And so the church was the first time I ever had any kind of deal with racism. Honestly feeling like I come from Brazil. Nobody is pure anything down here. Everybody down here is mixed. I'm a quarter Indian, Native American. My family, I have great grandparents that were slaves. Obviously, I'm white also, and I have people who came on a boat from Europe to colonize the New World. I know based on my last name, Azeredo, it comes from like a cherry tree that comes somewhere in the Iberian Peninsula, and the people from that area were persecuted for Jewish religion, and so what they did is they changed. They all took Christian names and took on names of trees and that were native to their environment. That's the general story about where my family name comes from.
What a very lovely global heritage you have.
I know. I was just gonna say, look how interconnected we all are.
As long as we treat everybody like people, we're fine. Which the problem is when your people are more important than my people, and you want to be more equal than me, and that's where things start being problematic. Definitely in the church, especially within that closed group, you had to. If your family didn't come from the Mayflower, you were pretty much going to be an outcast.
Really?
I mean,
So that was your experience like in that
was
echelon?
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah,
Can
oh
you
yeah.
go into that a little bit more? I'm so
Yeah,
curious.
I knew of several people that had that came directly from that line of people who colonized, were original colonizers in the U.S. and all that. People that came from that kind of thing were usually elevated to a certain level within the church and pushed in a certain direction, differently than, say, Latinos for the most part for a long time were kind of pushed aside here and kept within their own group. On the Ambassador campus, you had the Spanish church that was up on the mountain, hidden in the corner. You had the main people that they cared about. Basically, they were wealthier, whiter, whatever. I mean, we had a mix of people, but it was mostly, you could tell, German descent, Takashi type people. Okay, there was thousands and thousands of people we're talking about here, so you wouldn't be able to fit everybody in the auditorium, anyways. But you had a morning group that they had their own little things, and then you had an Imperial group that would meet in the Imperial Gymnasium, and that was there also another I don't know, 800 to 1,000 people. I mean, it was a lot of people.
So were these separate talking? Like, were these separate speeches that were specifically for people in these groups?
Yes, they would have. It wasn't like you would have one meeting, one church thing, and then everything is broadcast to all these other places. No, everybody would have their own ministers. They would speak in their own little languages, and they would all have their own little teaching and their own subjects. The church organized it, but the main thing that would end up, getting recorded and saved, and on the holidays, the 7th grade holidays, you'd have the big major sermonettes and speeches and stuff. That would be the only thing that they would broadcast from the Ambassador Auditorium, and they would have, Herbert Armstrong preach and all that.
What was the earlier sessions you were mentioning, where those were kind of separate for people in the higher levels?
They put their pastors in training that they wanted to push out and to, be in charge here, be in charge there, and they'd still be in your general area and your general control, but they could train them in those places. They would have younger pastors go to those areas. Also depended on the graduates from Ambassador College. They choose their grads based, who is going to be in the ministry from there a lot. They train them from there. So my dad, they invited him to move to Pasadena to be a translator for him. My dad was able to bring his family back to New Jersey and packed everything in a U-Haul trailer. And I think he had a Datsun F10, which was probably like a really tiny car, pulling this U-Haul trailer with everything we owned, following a cousin that also wanted to move to California because he wanted to go to Hollywood. So it was cousin in a old Oldsmobile, and a family of 5 in a Datsun, going from New Jersey to California.
Sounds like our trip, Pat.
Cross country. And we nearly died several times on that trip. And then we lived in Hollywood for 3-4 months, 2 families in a 1-bedroom, trying to make things happen. And we ended up moving to Pasadena, and my dad got a job working. I think he was working for Blue Chip or something. So and then he part-time volunteer at the church and was working 3-4 times a week, translating stuff, bringing stuff home, doing it all by hand at that time on a typewriter. And most of my dad's dealings with partnership in church were all failures. Okay. My dad's business was able to net close to $200,000 a year. And my family was struggling.
Yeah.
Because you had first, second, third tithe. My dad would also send money to Brazil to help his family down there.
Yeah.
Several times my dad got big deals that just never quite, just my dad was too honest. In the business world, you got to have a little street smart, a little bit.
Yeah, street smart. put it.
Okay. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with the streets, you gotta understand how the streets work.
Oh yeah.
And my dad,
You got to know how to play the game. Is what?
yeah,
Yeah.
you got to. I mean, my little things. I mean, I really wish my dad had studied law and become an attorney, and he would have never made any of the mistakes that he made. My dad was really big on earn your way.
Yeah.
Don't you're not getting handouts. Now my
Even with
sister,
all
on
the
the
fame you had early on, huh? You didn't
I
get to ride
know.
that to the top.
we didn't quite fit in with the worldwide's ideal what they wanted because we weren't white enough. We weren't a lot of stuff, and they really looked down on you if you were mixed too. You would have had trouble with your Indian husband. It would have been a challenge for them, and then your kids would be looked down on also.
Mhm.
Oh, they're mixed breeds. They're yeah. It was sad.
What was that
And
like for you to have been someone who was told you were elect while at the same time kind of being,
Right.
hidden or swept under?
I had to develop a tough outer shell. You could hit me, but I wasn't going to go down. I always had to swim against the waters.
But Denny, how did your father feel about it? Obviously,
My dad-
he's mixed
my
as
dad-
well.
My dad just thought, hey, no, the doors will open. The doors will open. Trust me, God will open a way. God will open a way.
In my opinion, I feel like a lot of people that were like darker races or mixed race would feel like they're at least part of the group, even if they come secondary. They're still at least part of the group. Does that
They
make
felt
sense?
yeah, it's like they're part of the great multitude or the 144,000 or whatever they want to put,
Right.
whatever terms they want to use. But you're just not at the right hand of God type of deal.
The fact that people were willing to accept that about themselves is quite scary.
Something's wrong here, but I was a little young, and you kind of follow your parents because you don't really have a choice.
Right.
So we went back, and I remember Armstrong died, obviously. And I remember the day he died. I was in school. They kind of had kind of a thing. They sent everybody home early. Everybody cried and all that stuff. I mean,
86.
I think a week or two prior when they were anointing to catch Pastor General.
Right.
I was there.
Oh.
Okay.
You were at everything.
Denny,
if I go back and look at these photos, am I going to see you in the background and be like, "That's little Denny"?
You'll see a bunch of heads and probably my hair. Right now, I think my personal goals is to get more involved in my community and try to make my living situation in my area, my town, a little bit better. I just have a good idea of what's right and a good idea of what's wrong, and I see a lot of what's wrong being implemented and a lot of what's right being rejected. And I think somebody has to stand up for the little guy. And in the U.S. they might destroy you emotionally or whatever. Down here they'll put you under the ground.
Denny, currently you're living in Pasadena?
I'm living in São Pedro da Aldeia, which is in Brazil.
You're back in Brazil. Okay.
I'm in Brazil. My mom still lives in Pasadena.
Okay.
I have a sister that just moved to Pasadena from San Francisco.
Okay.
And another one that lives in Glendale, I think.
Is your mother still involved with one of the Worldwide Church of God Splinter churches?
No. When after Armstrong died, there was a period of confusion, and the church kind of kept progressing with inertia in the direction it was already going until they decided to start changing things. And when they started to change little things behind the scenes, the ministers that were all in would start saying, hey, wait a minute, this didn't work. And they'd either hush them up, send them off to the Philippines, send them off to Europe, send them away from headquarters, and start making their decisions without them. And that's why the church is so splintered and ended up falling in the direction it did. Anybody that could stand up against the different new ideas and thoughts and arguments was sent away. We'd have, Friday night Bible study. That would meet. We'd go to the auditorium for that. Then we'd go in, and the PM on Saturday. Okay. Then of course I spent my 5 days at school, which was right across the street from the auditorium. My family, we were involved in everything every day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how cults work. That's how churches of high control work, is they maintain their grip on your time. And that sounds like a lot of time.
They never talked about Armstrong's divorce.
Of course.
They never talked
wanted
about
to cover that up.
I think my dad used to tell me stories about Raider. But
yeah, Stanley Raider.
I
bet there's a lot of juice there.
Yeah.
And what did he say?
So it's nothing really that juicy. It's just we might talk about it in the future. It might come back. I mean, I enjoy talking to you ladies, and I, things. The more I listen, the more I remember. I mean, I was pretty young. I'm fortunate to have had been blessed with a pretty decent memory for most of my childhood.
Yeah.
And so,
are you involved with any particular church or religion at the moment then?
Right now, no. I'm open to, visit with people. I think we have a need for community, but I'm not part of anything. I'm not interested in anything. I'm not gonna. I will help people that need help. I will. I mean, like right now, yesterday I just drove 8 cats to a cat shelter, a 3-hour drive. Okay.
It sounds like maybe you go to the church of being a good human.
Yeah.
I think
you don't need a church to be a good human. Yeah.
I think if you do what's right and you put enough of right things back to back, you'll be fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what building or what group of people you're with. I honestly believe the sun is going to come up tomorrow morning. I believe that after the world ends, that there's going to be a sunrise after that, and the world's going to continue. You can think the world's going to end, and more power to you. We can literally destroy ourselves. That's an actual fact. It's not a fiction. It's not science fiction. It's science reality that we can push a button tomorrow and destroy the world and obliterate ourselves. I think it's important that we all get involved in our communities to try to make our lives and the lives of our families better.
Right. Well, I would contend that having the school system here in the States fully lacking a comprehensive study of civics and how people participate in that process is a problem. But I think it was intentional, because the people in power do not want the average folks to be informed. It wouldn't go well for them.
Thankfully, I didn't go through the public school system early on. So by the time I got out of 6th grade, I knew how to read and write. Okay. I had a pretty strong grasp on civics. They did I think for the most part, most of my teachers were extremely competent.
You said it was a net positive, your experience in the church and the Imperial schools. And I can see that, right? You avoided some of the pitfalls that come with public school, and you kind of got this little bit of a leg up to see the world around you. But in some of our conversations, you had said that you felt like your experience as a male was different than how your sisters experienced the church. And I just wondered if you could go into that.
Yeah. First of all, the grip my parents had on them was extremely, extremely tight. Me, I was left to fly on my own quite a bit. I could get involved in events with even people outside the church, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But they were completely excluded from anything and everything outside. Okay, if there was going to be members of the opposite sex or of the that weren't people from outside the church, they were going to stay home, or they weren't going to be involved in anything like that. Okay, and it was very very tight on them. And so I was a kid, and I would sit down with people, and my dad would preach to everybody. Everywhere he went, my dad would talk religion, and
course.
constantly. His goal when he moved to Pasadena was to go to Ambassador College and get his theology thing. He was going to do theology with Ambassador College, and so he was able to do a two-year degree. It took him 4 years to do it because they wouldn't let him do it full time. They said, no, you got to take care of your family. He just ran into some ministerial roadblocks that prevented him. No, you can we're going to limit you to this. And he had to insist to get to finish their courses. And he did it because he was stubborn and he had his mindset to it. Not because anybody made his life easier. I remember him going to studying a lot in classes. My dad was not only fluent in English, Portuguese, and French. He could read Greek and Hebrew. He focused on what he needed to try to grow religiously, and he believed what he honestly learned from what was in the Bible, and he lived it.
After your father passed, I'm sorry, he passed in 2001, which was after the split, like the official.
My dad was disfellowshipped when I was in sixth grade. I mean, imagine you being 10, 11 years old ish, with your sister, and two ministers come to your living room and sit down with your parents and literally say to your mom, okay, if you want to be part of the church, we can arrange you to have a place to live, and the church will be your husband and will take care of you and your kids, but you can no longer have any kind of communication with your husband because he's no longer part of the church.
What? Whoa! I've not heard it that way.
I can't remember the name of the ministers, but I can remember they were two ministers that were very prominent, and they were people we've had dinner with. I mean, they're people we knew. They came down to our house and said it like this.
Do you think that level of extremeness was because you were at headquarters? Because I've heard of it not being quite so serious elsewhere.
About 2 years after Armstrong died, my dad received a letter. Somebody handed to him that was from a guy named Martin Filippello. He basically was saying that he discovered, he started to study the Bible on a daily basis as form of a daily sacrifice, and this daily sacrifice was very simple. Daily, that's what he called it. The daily sacrifice.
It sounds like a sacrifice of your precious time.
Yeah. You wake up you wake up about 30 minutes before sunrise and read the Bible for half an hour, and then you read the Bible half an hour after sunset, and you do it with the family, and of course and you do this on a religious basis, and it becomes it's obviously a sacrifice to stop what you're doing and go study like this. Well, my dad started doing this for a little while, and then we had an earthquake while my dad was doing this. Oh, no. Okay, I think it was October 1st.
That sounds like bias to me.
Okay. Okay. When you're in that mindset, you don't need much to confirm it. So I think it was October 1st. We had an earthquake, and when that happened, we lived in an apartment. My parents were managers, so everybody goes outside, and one of the people that was in our apartment, that was renting one of the apartments there, was a guy named Jack. He was from Haiti, and Jack was going to Ambassador College. He was a newlywed with his wife. The two got to talk in religion, and the two started coming up with, agreeing with some things and disagreeing with others, and they would argue it out, and they had interesting ways to argue and different things, and the backgrounds went interesting, so they meshed really well. They started studying the Bible together. Okay, and when that started happening, my dad started to question some things the church was doing. We were having a dinner with a family. I went to school with the girls, but we had imagined this family that had their mother died of cancer. They went through a really rough fight. We were there. We brought them dinner. We took care of, we showed them a lot of support, and we were close. My two sisters would play with their two girls. We decided to bring a cake, and my dad decided, I don't know, subject comes up and started talking religion and stuff, like usual. Mm-hmm. And something happened where my dad was questioning some doctrine or something in the church, and literally from out of nowhere, the guy said, "Well, if we want to discuss that, you need to talk to you need to have a minister present. I don't want any part of it." And literally, imagine he picked up the cake, handed it back to my mom, uncut, unsliced, handed it back, and my kid, imagine the kids are playing in the other room. They go and get the kids and literally put us out the door and close the door behind us, without saying goodbye, just like that. That was and
this was because your dad brought up something that was even slightly questioning a doctrine.
He was just questioning it's a doctrine, right? And so that within a week was when the minister showed up and came to talk to my dad and just flat out did this. Oh yeah. It was just fast.
Just on the word of this friend who kind of like narked on you.
My dad did write a letter and sent it out to, let's say, several hundred people that he knew, if not more.
Well, that'll do it.
Denny, do you remember what the topic was? Because our father was also excommunicated from Restored Church of God for writing a letter directly to David C. Pack. And it was questioning, trying to get an answer, and he didn't get an answer. He was excommunicated. Was it kind of like that scenario?
I don't remember what the question was. I honestly didn't get a chance to read the letter. My dad did talk a little bit about what he was doing at the time. And he kind of warned us and said, this is probably going to raise some eyebrows, but I have to know. And the reaction was, if the church doesn't agree with this, and I know this to be true, then then this isn't the place I need to be. That was kind of the preparation that he kind of prepped us for.
So he was questioning from the standpoint of like, oh, they're making these doctrinal changes, and I'm kind of questioning things too. So he was kind of going in that direction. And
so and this is where we ended up getting, booted out of one church, going to a Splinter church. Then my dad started questioning the Sabbath. Then my dad started questioning this and questioning that. And then I mean, we literally went on a roller coaster for the next year and a half or so. This guy literally thought he was going to be one of the two witnesses and thought Armstrong was going to be one of the witnesses, even though he was dead. And he thought he was going to be dead for 3.5 years, and then he's going to be resurrected. Oh, yeah.
So 3.5 years. There we go.
Oh, yeah. So 3.5 years comes around. And I remember, imagine, 5:30 in the morning, you're sitting in the car with your dad in front of a cemetery. in front of what is it, Morton View? I forget the name of the cemetery, but I can tell you exactly where Armstrong was buried because I was there, unfortunately, many times. But
wait, so your dad took you and sat at Armstrong's grave, waiting for him to be resurrected on the spot?
That's what I interpreted.
Oh, he believed every word and when obviously nobody got up out of the grave and nobody came back.
Imagine that.
He's like, well, then false prophet. He left.
Oh, did he admit that he thought Armstrong was a false prophet after that?
No, he admitted the guy that said that Armstrong was a prophet was a false prophet, and then left.
Okay.
And when my dad left, when he joined this thing, he joined it with he took the Haitian friend Jack with him, and the two of them would study together, and so they were kind of prepared for this. Okay. It's got one thing. We have a saying here in Brazil, eu pago para ver, which means I'll pay to see. In other words, it's like you go to the circus and it's going to be a circus, and you just pay to see the event knowing that it's going to be a clown show. And so he paid to see this, he paid for it. He put money where his mouth was. Saw that it was a clown show. Said it's a clown show. Let's get out of here. And when he did, he took about 80 members with him.
Oh, wow.
So my dad and Jack, the two of them started their own group.
Oh, okay.
Your dad started a Splinter, huh?
My dad's, yeah. Everywhere you go, everybody's looking for that last prophet, that great prophet. And so my dad wasn't looking for any of that. He's just looking for, hey, what's right, what's wrong? Let's put one foot in front of the other.
Our fathers sound very similar, though people like Gerald Flurry and David C. Pack do say they are the last. They both are the last.
Yeah. So then we start going through time, and our apartment building that used to be rented to the general public normally ended up slowly being filled with members.
Okay.
So it became a little. If it wasn't completely cultish before, imagine 30 some odd units of members of the same church. Okay. Yeah. It starts coming, and then they all work for your dad's business, so they're all employees. So obviously, my dad's business is paying for all these 30 apartments for rent, and having to cash flow that. We started to notice that, hey, things started to become just dystopic, unbalanced.
Yeah.
And
what was the name of it? Did he have a name for the church that he started?
Yeah.
It ended with Church of God, Israel, or Black Hebrew Israelite Christian Jew type. When you hear that stuff, that was the stuff my dad was preaching.
Okay.
My dad had a meeting with Farrakhan. I mean, he went to a meeting with Farrakhan where they're chanting "Kill the white man," and he's looking around and he's looking around, and he's like, wait a minute, this is kind of this is kind of bad.
I don't know.
Kill the white man, kill the Jew, that kind of those kinds of chants. And he was present for that, dressed in sackcloth.
Woo.
Obviously, I've never done anything insane like that, but I've seen it. I can say I've seen it.
You were witness to it for sure. You had
Definitely.
front row seat, Denny.
I mean, my dad went to Israel, went to Jerusalem. Gazans tried to stone him. I mean, his buddy could go anywhere he wanted because he was Haitian. He was black. He could go anywhere he wanted, and he couldn't follow because he was excluded because he looked too Jewish.
Well, Denny, so this is totally off topic, but I have a novel that I wrote a few years back, and it's funny. My protagonist actually has sort of a supervisor, companion, father-like figure to her. I named him Master Sergeant Perez, and your whole look and your demeanor is so much like him. That's all I see when I look at you. I'm like, the character I created is very much you.
Oh, that is so funny.
If you ever get a chance, I would send you my book if I could.
I will. I would read it. I definitely would.
You're Master Sergeant Perez. It's amazing. Like I picture you just with a mustache, and you're.
I took my beard. I took my beard off this morning.
Okay.
I tried to clean up a little bit. I mean, my dad was close many times to being rich, but he was more interested in God than he was in money.
How did your dad's church go? Because I know you said he has passed, but what was the progression of that church?
What was the progression? First, they anointed him as one of the two witnesses, which was stupid. Then they wanted to restore the temple, and they anointed 4 people, and we thought he was the right pillar, and on the left pillar was Jacquin. They ended up anointing him Tobias, and they named the other guy Moses, and so they basically Moses and Aaron type of reborn type of BS.
What?
And and my dad was starting to think, hey, wait, this stuff's getting a little too far. This is probably not going to go well. So he started sending a lot of his money to Brazil, and he had planned to move to Brazil. We bought a house down here, and it was in a really nice neighborhood. And his goal was to partner up with his brother. His brother was also one of his best friends, and they would go into business together in the interior of Brazil. And I mean, my dad's brother was he was in finance and accounting. For him, he decided to quit instead of being a vice president for Price Waterhouse. He was going to be one of the senior vice presidents. It's one of the biggest accounting firms in the world. And to be a vice president of that would have been a step down for him. He decided to start his own business.
Yeah.
And when it started getting successful, his brother had a car accident. His brother died. The house was still in his brother's name, so the house was zeroed, with, paid off in full. And his brother was late on his regular life insurance, and so his family didn't get anything. And his family was literally kicked out of their apartment because they were renting that same month. They didn't even wait till the end of the month to kick them out. They kicked them off right away. And so they had nowhere to go, and they moved into the house my dad bought. And my dad didn't have the guts in his heart to put his brother's family on the street. Basically, $200K worth of investment ended up turning into about $5,000. And that $5,000 came back. And remember, this time we're in that little community. We have a full-out accountant working for us. Well, that money comes in and goes into my dad's account, which was at that time controlled by somebody else.
Yeah. And
so the money went in. They decided, the church, which he was supposedly up at the top, because he owned the business and owned all the stuff. They decided, we're not going to let you guys do anything with it. They decided to purchase a vehicle and move to Florida. And basically, everybody that was here that wanted to stay in that group went with them to Florida. And they kind of left us high and dry, holding the bills and holding all. Yeah. They kind of, it was like overnight. Seriously. And so I think that was the last of my dad being part of any religious organization.
That'll do it.
Yeah. So
you start seeing people's true intentions, their true nature.
He ended up suing the family. He won the lawsuit, obviously, but they didn't have anything else to take because they had given it all to the church and their little, to their little cult. And then we start listening to the news. You got the Koreshes of this world and all the craziness in the world. It's like we see parallel after parallel after parallel after parallel.
Yeah,
I want no part of it.
All the similarities. Isn't it exhausting, Denny?
Oh yeah. So he never went back to any of the other Splinter churches. He never went back to nothing. He kind of stayed, his own thing. And wherever we went, we still always had people following us.
Oh, okay.
Some people have a tendency to attract followers and be leaders. And
how this is before the influencer days. How did people know? How did he just continuously still talk about religion?
This is all before before everybody's online. I mean, even in 2000, people weren't online. I mean, my dad wrote 3 books, which I don't have a copy of any of them. He wrote one on the priesthood. He wrote one on the lunar calendar.
Oh,
I mean,
I'd be very interested in seeing those books. If you could send me the details.
I would figure. I gotta track it down.
Did he write any books that were kind of specifically about Worldwide Church of God, or just other topics kind of related to it?
I don't remember. A lot of what I had, I've lost over the years. I mean, I had a deposit, a storage deposit that was in the U.S. that I wasn't able to maintain because I moved out. That's been abandoned for over 10 years, so I don't know what happened to it. But I know in that deposit we had I had tapes, audio tapes. My dad, almost every study my dad did on every subject that he knew, he had it recorded on tapes. And I treasured that, but I couldn't take it with me to war, and I couldn't take it with me when I traveled and so I ended up putting it in this place, and I ended up losing it. So
Bummer.
we'll see what if that turns into another religion. I mean, it's funny that things in this world don't just end when you stop thinking about it. They tend to go on.
Isn't
You
that
know,
the
it's like
Yeah.
yes.
it's like
I have
oh,
to
you
tell
don't
you,
think
that
about her.
surprised me. I was surprised. I thought when the church fell apart, I was 17, and to me, it just kind of disappeared and didn't exist in the world.
Well,
And I had no idea until I looked it up.
I
Like,
mean,
oh no, it's still out there.
It's still
I
very
mean,
much out there.
the church had major, huge flaws. Okay, first of all, they did not know how to deal with the mixed race. That was the first thing. They didn't have an answer for that.
I don't understand.
They
Deal with what?
they they didn't know how to deal with women. They didn't know
Yeah, we don't.
they had a major gender problem. They had a major issue with I mean, you
Poor
can
people.
believe what I mean. They didn't have. I don't think so much that they had a major issue with poor people. It was just their target market was rich people.
Mhm.
That's a little different. Okay, you'll take the poor people, you'll treat them with respect, but your goal is the rich people. Mhm.
I've wondered that actually. To me, that was the
Mhm.
sense I got about it, but I couldn't ever confirm it. Do you
No,
have any examples of how that was
I
played
think.
out where it
I,
was clear?
I mean, I can say, look, if you were, if you weren't a major contributor,
Mhm.
tithing and doing all that, that stuff, and you had an issue, say your spouse was having an affair or something like that, you would have a whole lot of different treatment than if you were one of the big players and you might have even been the one doing wrong. In one situation, they would counsel you, well, you need to try to make this work, and let's just try to forgive her and all this stuff. And on the other side, they would try to cover it up for you. I
Oof.
mean, yeah,
Depending on how much they need.
depending on who it was. I mean, look at all the stuff that was going on with Garner Ted.
Yeah.
I mean, having done the military thing, having walked, behind, everything, I can understand where Garner Ted was coming from. Okay, he's kind of spoiled. He kind of has this very religious dad who's preaching all this stuff, and he's seen a little bit of hypocrisy here and a little bit of hypocrisy there, so he's gonna be a little rebellious.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had seen my dad not practice what he preached, I would have been rebellious, because I but I honestly, I respected my dad, because when he said something, he'd say, look, this sounds crazy, but we're going to try this. So what do you mean we're going to keep the Sabbath on Thursday? One year was on a Wednesday. I've seen it on a Thursday. Yeah, yes. And that was because we were going through the lunar calendar and tried to live that for a little while.
Oh,
And
wow.
imagine doing that in a public school. No, so
So
we
you
would
were
miss
pulled out of school every Thursday or Wednesday for a while.
Yes.
Woo.
Oh yeah. My sisters got to miss some of that because they ended up having issues with my dad and ended in disagreements with him, and my dad ended up sending them to Brazil to stay with grandparents, and so they had another issue with another set of circumstances, because dealing with with the religious nonsense and dealing with the insanity of being in a third world country are two different things. That's how they got away from that grip. They went to another country and had to deal with other stuff.
Well, gosh, is that almost like your dad disfellowshipped or excommunicated your sisters by sending them away?
Because so much of the teachings of the church and so much of it was ingrained in his very soul. I mean, that it was hard to disconnect from that. And then to see his kids going in a different direction was heartbreaking for him, I'm sure. And he didn't know how to handle it, so he he'd freak out and say the wrong things and act out. And I think what was best for them was that they were apart from each other for a little while. And then my dad tried to reconcile and bring them back, and that again didn't work again, because now they were more ingrained in the world, more used to how the stuff was.
Would you say that Imperial Schools, your time there and the time in the upper
I
echelons of the church, like influenced your
I
leadership
I
skills in any
I was
way?
gonna ask that
I,
just thing. Yeah.
I think whenever you are in contact with people who are in charge, in strong positions, and you're not you're in a position where they're teaching you and training you and giving you and sharing with you some of their abilities, that stuff rubs off on you.
Yeah.
That stuff
Okay.
rubs off on you.
And you
Okay.
paid attention, Denny. I think as a child, you were just absorbing everything that you saw around you, just
I
and
mean,
applying it in different aspects of
I
your
mean,
life later on.
honestly, the only what I missed after leaving Imperial were my friends, were the students.
Yeah.
Okay, the relationships. Okay, because I mean, you look around and then you see these people. Okay, you grow up. You see a couple that they marry their high school sweetheart. They live their whole life together, and you go, I didn't have that chance, because my life was just, you know, you know, and so, and then my relationships ended up being with complete strangers, with people that I didn't understand where they came from, didn't have the same background, didn't have the same beliefs, didn't have the same structure, and then obviously that stuff that led to the problems and relationship issues that I ended up having in life. Why my life has turned the way it did. Why, if the structure I had carried on, I would have probably turned out a little bit differently. I would have probably been more sheltered. I would have been less street smart. I would have, less successful in business, less successful in life.
I got asked this question in college too. I'm like, what does success mean to you? And do you
Okay,
feel like you've achieved it?
I haven't, not yet, not by
You
any
haven't.
stretch.
Okay.
What I've achieved peace, which
Good.
is different. I've achieved peace. I have my regular. You have regular life stresses for everything, paying bills and dealing with the daily stuff. But I'm at peace. I still have the ghosts of war. I'll put it to you that way. When I was in war, I'd literally make peace with death and God every night. Okay, I might not wake up tomorrow, and you send that last email to them, your family, I love you, and go to sleep knowing that you might not wake up tomorrow. I came back from Iraq and Afghanistan kind of a mess,
Yeah.
really hot mess. I spent nearly 2 months inpatient in a hospital.
Okay, I got to that point. I think that's pretty normal for all of us returning I had a hard time readjusting to society as well.
I wasn't nutso. I wasn't, I was sane. I just came back and I had the jitters. I couldn't sit down and drive. I couldn't do much. I was, everything bothered me. And so, I started feeling better when I was at the hospital, because I'd see a guy who came in. Oh, what happened to you? Oh, I was on my couch and I dozed off and I nearly strangled my kid because he jumped on my lap and I was half asleep and I didn't know it was him. That kind of thing. So he didn't hurt his kid, but he said I could have, and it scared my family, and my family's afraid of me now.
I mean,
so
for that long, being overseas on constant high alert too, it's very hard. Civilization.
I've met the most wonderful people and just the most broken people, just because of the fruits of war.
Wow, we are just barely scratching the surface of what we need to know.
We could probably do these. We could probably do this some more another time.
Well, anything else you want to touch on for this episode, Denny?
For this episode, well, people are looking for this magical, spiritual world. What we've accomplished as a human race is amazing, and I think we're going to accomplish much more, but we can just as easily destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
And the doom and gloom, religions are just a pointer that say, hey, we can destroy ourselves. I think we don't necessarily. I don't need to be a part of that to know, hey, the world's a dangerous place. The world's a nasty place. The world's a bad place. The world's a pretty place too. I mean, some of the most beautiful things are still out there. We haven't destroyed it all. Okay.
And there are
But-
people who are good and kind and would do anything for each other. The more I look, it's like we can find so much beauty and we can find so much bullshit. And all I can think is they occur in fairly equal measure.
We really weren't prepared in that kind of upbringing. And being in such a closed and isolated, because the word is totally isolated, and they did everything to separate you and isolate you from any and every possible idea out there. And in some ways that's good, because then you have less problems, less conflict, but in reality you're not prepared to defend yourself from all those ideas. And you're not, and so when that happens, and life is a lot harder than what it needs to be.
So many people focus, so much on, like the afterlife and what else is out there. I'm like, look at all we need to do here and now.
And you can, if you want to put everything in this bank to collect in your afterlife and forget about living now, you just wasted a whole 30, 40 years of your life. I've enjoyed talking to Patty, and thank you very much for finally talking to you, Nancy.
Yes, nice to meet you, Denny, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
All right, you have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.